So const icon map is an object. If the channel is channel type from @prisma/client. So let me show you everything I have imported here. Channel type, member role, and a server. So make sure you have the channel type. So channel type.text. In that case, we're going to render the hash icon from Lucid React. So make sure you have this imported here. And you can just go ahead and copy this 2 more times. If the channel is audio, in that case, audio. In that case, go ahead and add the mic icon from Lucid React. And if it's video, go ahead and add the video icon from Lucid React. So hash, mic, and video like this. Great. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and let's add const params to be use params from next navigation and const router to be use router from next navigation as well. So make sure you have use params and use router from next/navigation. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's create a dynamic icon using this map here. So I'm going to write const capital I. So icon with a capital I like this, because it's going to be rendered as a component. It's going to be an icon map, open brackets, channel.type like this. Great. So now let's go ahead and let's replace this div right here with a button like that. Let's go ahead and add on click to be an empty arrow function. And let's write a class name, which is going to be dynamic. So import cn from add/libutils. Make sure you have the cn here. So I'm just going to separate those two. There we go. This is what I just imported. Great. And let's go inside. And for the first default values, let's add line-clamp-1, font-semi-bold, text my apologies. So I went way ahead of myself. Okay. So what we're going to do is write group px-2, py-2 like this, rounded-md, flex, items-center, gap-x-2 like that, w-full, on hover, bg-sync-700/10 like that, and on dark, on hover, background is going to be sync-700/50. Let's give it a transition class, and let's give it a margin bottom of 1 as well. Great. So now we have that. And I'm just going to zoom out to see if we are already seeing something. It appears not yet. Okay. Inside of this button, let's render the icon. So icon, which we got from here like that. And let's give this icon a class name of flex-shrink-0, w-5h-5, text-sync-500, and dark text-sync-400 like that. And let me just expand to see if we are seeing anything. And there we go. You can see that we are starting to see our first text channel inside of here. So right now, the only thing we have rendered is this icon, but slowly more stuff is going to appear here. Okay, so we have this icon right here. Now let's go ahead below the icon and add a paragraph like this, which is going to render channel.name. So now let's go ahead and give this paragraph a class name. So class name is going to be dynamic again. So cn, let's give it the default classes of line-clamp-1, font-semi-bold, text-extra small, text-sync-500, group-hover, text-sync-600, like this, dark, text-sync-400, but dark, group hover is going to be text-sync-300 and transition like this. So we have a lot of classes, more than usual. That's because we are working with handling both the light mode and the dark mode at the same time. Okay, and now let's create the second, which is going to be the dynamic class here, which we forgot to do in this button, so we'll get back to that. So add a comma at the end of this initial class in the cn for this paragraph here. And let's write if params (channel ID) is equal to the current channel.id. In that case, render the class text-primary on dark mode render text-sync-200, 200 like that. On dark mode, group-hover is going to be text-white like this. So let's go ahead and let's see this now. So there we go. You can see how our channel is looking now. Great. And let's just go ahead. Let's go back to this button element. And after the end of this first initial class inside the CN library here, add a comma and let's write if params channel ID is equal to channel.id. In that case, add a class name bg-sync-700/20, and on dark, that's going to be bg-sync-700 like that. Great. So let me zoom out a bit so you can perhaps see this a bit clearer like this. Great. So we have a lot of classes. That's because for every hover color, we are also doing the equivalent in dark mode, right? So we are having a fully customized light and dark mode. That's why we have so many classes. I know it's a bit hard to follow, but you can always just visit my GitHub and copy it if you're having trouble with it. Even I am getting confused in all of these classes, as you saw in the beginning when I started this component. Great. So what we're going to do now is we're going to enable some additional actions when we hover on this general class name, right? Because we're going to be able to delete the channel or edit the channel, or if it's general, in this case, we're not going to be able to do anything with it. So we're going to display a little lock icon here. So let's see how we're going to do that now. So go ahead and find the end of this paragraph right here. I'm going to zoom in back. So find the end of the paragraph and write if channel.name is not general, like that. And if a role, whoops, I went out of this conditional, and if role is not equal to member role, which we have imported .guest. So if this channel is not a general channel, and if the current role of this logged in user is either a moderator or an admin, or in other words, not a guest, only then are we going to render a div with a class name of ml-auto flex items-center and gap-x-2 like this. And let's add the action tooltip, which we can import from /action tooltip. So like this, and I'm just going to replace that with /components like that. And let's go ahead and let's give this action tooltip a label of edit like this. And inside of the action tooltip, let's add the edit icon from Lucid React. So make sure you have edit hash mic and video from Lucid React. Great. And let's go ahead and let's just style this. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one a class name of hidden, but on group hover is going to be visible or block. W-4, H-4, text-sync-500 on a hover, text-sync-600 like this. In dark mode, the default text is going to be text-sync-400, but in dark mode on hover, it's going to be text-sync-300 and transition like this. Great. And you can go ahead and copy this entire action tooltip here and paste it below and replace the edit icon with the trash icon like this from Lucid React. So make sure you have the trash icon here. And now, if you try, you're going to notice that nothing actually appears here. So let's create a new channel here called new channel. Leave it at the text. Make sure it's a channel type text because we are only rendering the text channels now. And there we go. Now you can see we have the edit and the delete options right here. And let's see if this looks right in light mode. There we go. We have both of those here. Perfect. Great. So now let's go ahead and let's add a little lock icon to the general channel right here to indicate that this channel cannot be modified in any way. So find the end of this conditional rendering right here. And after that, go ahead and write if channel.name is equal to general. In that case, let's go ahead and render a lock icon from Lucid React like this. And let's give it a class name of margin left auto w-4 h-4 text-sync-500, and on dark mode text-sync-400, like that, and just make sure you have the lock imported from Lucid React. So now you should see that our general has a lock button, but our new channel has an edit and delete option right here. Great. So we're gonna go back here to actually enable these modals to edit and delete, but for now let's just wrap up the entire sidebar here. Great. So we successfully finished the server channel. What we have to do is, of course, add this on click and enable the edit and the trash buttons here. But let's go ahead and let's go back inside of our server sidebar now. And the same way we did with text channels, so we added a conditional for the length of the text channels array. We rendered the server section which says, okay, these are text channels, and then we iterated over them. We're going to do the same thing, so you can copy this entire thing. So starting with the text channels length, including the server section and the mapping, and paste it just below there like this. So now if you take a look, we're going to have two sections of text channels here. But what we are going to change is that this one, the second one, is not going to be text channels, it's going to be audio channels, like that. And we're also going to render audio channels.map here. So let's go ahead and replace the label with voice channels, because remember, towards the user we are calling them voice channels, only internally we are calling them audio channels, and change the channel type to audio like this. Great, so let's go ahead now, let's see how that looks. There we go, look at this. I already have a voice channel, so if you don't, just go ahead, click create a channel and create a new one. So new audio like this, and it's gonna appear here any second. There we go, new audio. Perfect. Now let's wrap it up by also copying this entire thing one more time and creating the video channels. So let's go ahead and paste it here, do the video channels thing right here, and the video channels.map. Let's call this video channels, and channel type is video, like that. Perfect. Let's go ahead. And there we go, I already have one, so you can test one more time if you don't. So new video, like that. Type is video and click create, and there we go. You now have a new video channel here. Perfect. What's left to render in this sidebar are all the members available here. So we want to render this list right here, not including ourselves, right? So we don't want to render ourselves, because in here we are going to render members which we with whom we can talk to, right? So when we click on them, we're going to open a conversation between one-on-one for that exact member and us. Perfect. So let's go ahead and you can copy this one more time, the video channels right here, and paste it. And change this to be members.length, change this server section to be section type members. That means that you don't need the channel type, like that, and change the label to members like this. Like that. And go ahead and pass in the server option, which is optional. So server like this. So we are going to need them from members, but we are not going to need them for channels. So you can see in this server section where we have channels, we are not passing the server because we don't need them. So we need the server in the server channel, but not in the server section for section type channels. But when it comes to members, we do need that server. You're going to see why in a second. Great. So instead of rendering this video channels, we are going to render members, and instead of calling this channel, we're going to call it an individual member, and inside we are no longer going to render just a server channel, we're going to render a server member like this. So go ahead and save that file, and let's go ahead now and let's just go inside of server and create a new file, a server-member.tsx like this. And let's go ahead and mark this as use client, and let's export const server member like that, and return a div saying server member like this. Go back to server sidebar, and as always, just import the server member from server member like this. And you should no longer be getting any errors. Great. So one more thing that I want to do before we begin this is just add a bit of more padding to these individual sections because it kind of looks cluttered. So let's see how we can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and find where I'm just going to zoom in so I can see a bit better. Okay, so around each of this mapping, I want to add a specific div. So let's see how I can do that. What I'm going to do, I'm going to create a div around this text channels.map like this. So I'm just going to map that. There we go. So now it's wrapped in a div, and I'm going to give this div a class name of space-y-2 pixels like that. Great. And I'm going to copy and paste this and do the same thing for the audio channels here. And don't forget to end the div like that. I'm going to copy it one more time, and I'm going to go to the video channels around the map and close it here, indent this thing, and one last time for the members, I forgot we also have them. So around this map like this, render it here. There we go. So let's take a look if that improved, and I feel like now it has a bit of a more space between them. Yes, they don't look as cluttered. Great. So now let's go ahead and yeah, you can see that now, since we added the section type of members here, we have a create channel. It still says create channel. Oh, so we found a mistake. Great. So this should say manage members, right? So let's fix that very quickly. Let's go back inside of our server section. So it's this component right here. So because we said the section type is members, inside, see, if section type is members, and if we are an admin of this server, we are showing the settings button and we are opening the members modal, passing in the server. So let's change this label to be manage members like this. So let's see how that looks now. There we go. Now I can easily create a channel whenever I want, and I can also easily manage members without going all the way to here. Perfect. So let's finish up this server member component. Let's go inside of the server member component, and first thing I want to do is create an interface. So let's go ahead. I will zoom back in and write interface server member props. Member is going to be a type of member from Prisma client, which is also going to have a profile, which is a type of profile from Prisma/client, like that. And a server is going to be a type of server from @Prisma/client. So member, profile, and the server right here. Let's go ahead and let's destruct those two. So member and server, and assign the props here. So server member props like this. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's go back to our server sidebar here, and let's give them the appropriate props inside. So first thing I'm going to do is give it a key of member.id. I'm going to pass in the member, and a server like this. Great. So let's go back to server member now. And first thing first, I want to create a role icon map here. So const role icon map is going to be an object, which is going to use the member role. So import member role from Prisma client like I did right here. So if member role is guest, there's going to be no icon next to its name. If member role is moderator, in that case, it's going to be a shield check from Lucid React. So make sure you have that imported, and it's going to have a class name of h-4, w-4, margin left-2, and text-indigo-500 like that. So I'm just going to zoom in a bit so you can see that in one line, copy and paste it, and don't forget to add a comma, change the last member role to be admin. Instead of shield check, it's going to be shield alert, like this, and change the text indigo to text rows like this. There we go. Perfect. So we have our role icon map ready. And now let's go ahead and let's just add const params to be use params from next/navigation. Const router is equal to use router from next/navigation. So we're just preparing this because we're going to need it later. All right. Let's get this individual icon, but since this is already a component, we don't have to name it in a capitalized way. We can just do const icon is equal to role icon map member.role like this. right? In our server section, let's take a look at our server section just so I can explain the difference quickly. You can see, is it server section? No, it is server channel, I suppose. Yeah. So you can see that inside I had to put a capital icon. That's because I am just working with a type of lucid icon. But in my server member, you can see that I'm not working with that. I'm working with a React component. So I can just name it like this, and then I can easily just render it as an icon. You can see the difference. I can just render this and this is going to work. But in my server channel, I cannot do that with this. Instead, I'm rendering it as a different element like this. So I could have done that here as well, but looks like I got ahead of myself and already wrote it in this way. So if you want to, you can refactor it, but you know, as long as it works. Let's go back inside of the server member now. So I just briefly explained why this is happening. And we actually don't have to render this icon right now. Let's instead replace this div with a button like this. And let's go ahead. And yeah, we can already render the icon inside. And let's go ahead and let's give this button a class name, which is going to be dynamic. So import cn from /lib_cn. Sorry, lib-utils, my apologies. All right, let's go back to the class name here. And let's go ahead and write group px-2 py-2 rounded-md flex items-center get-x-2 w-full hover bg-sync-700/10 on dark on hover bg is going to be sync 700/50, a transition class, and margin bottom of 1 like that. And let's add a comma and a dynamic class params $.member_id is equal to member.id. In that case, we are going to render bg-sync-700/20, and in dark mode, it's going to be bg-sync-700 like this. So let me zoom out just a bit so you can see how this is supposed to look like. So I have this class name, these are all the default classes, and then I added a little comma here and added a dynamic class here. Great. So let's go back inside. And let's go ahead and let's render the user avatar, which we created a couple of steps back. So import user avatar from /user avatar or /components user avatar like this. And let's go ahead and give this user avatar a source of member.profile.image URL. And I am also going to give it a class name because remember, we added a class name prop to this component so we can modify it whenever we want. And in this case, I want it to look a little bit smaller. So I'm going to write class name H-8 and W-8. That is for small devices, but in medium, we're going to have H-8 and W-8 like this. Great. Now let's go ahead and create a paragraph, which is going to render that profile name. So member.profile.name. And inside, let's go ahead and give this paragraph a dynamic class name. So class name cn font-semi-bold text-sm text-sync-500 like this group-hover text sync 600 like that, dark text-sync-400, dark group-hover text-sync-300, and a transition like this. And for the dynamic ones, if params $.channel-id is equal to member.id like that, let's go ahead and add text-primary like this, dark text-sync-200 like this, dark group-hover text-white like this. Great, so let's take a look at how this looks now. So just make sure that you have a member inside of your member list right here. If you don't, just go ahead and invite yourself, log out, paste the link, and just go back in here. And there we go. You can see that now we have all of our channels here. We have all of our members here. We can already open some stuff here. Perfect. So one more thing that I want to do before we go back inside of the server channel and server member, so we activate this models here, is just quickly modify this create a channel buttons here. So you can see that right now when I click on text channel, the default channel type is text, so that is completely fine. But when I click on voice channel, it will be cool if it was selected to be audio by default, wouldn't it? Right? And same for video channel. It will be cool if it pre-selected video for me. So let's go ahead and quickly do that. So let's go back inside of the use model store. Make sure you save all these files. Go back inside of the use model store and let's extend our model data. So besides the possibility of accepting a server, let's go ahead and write channel type question mark channel type from Prisma client. So make sure you import that like this. Great. And no need to change anything else here. And now let's go ahead and let's go inside of components server, inside of server section right here, where we call, let's find this create channel option right here and pass in the data channel type like this, and we already have the channel type in the props right here. Perfect. And now that we pass in that, we can go back inside of our components models, inside of the create channel model right here, and let's go ahead and let's fix this quickly. Just below this form, let's add a use effect from React like this, like that, and let's extract the channel type from the data now. So in this use model, we can get the data, and below this is model open, let's extract the potential channel type from the data like this. So there is a potential that we have a channel type, and in this use effect, let's go ahead and write if there is a channel type. In that case, form.setValue type is going to be channel type like this. And let's go ahead and add an else here. Form.setValue of type channel type.text like this. Great. And let's just pass in the channel type here and the form. And now let me just take a look at what this error is. So we can easily resolve that by going back into this const form use form and just add channel type pipe channel type.text. Great. So let's take a look at now. I'm going to refresh this. And if I click on voice channel, it's pre-selecting audio. If I click on video channels, it's pre-selecting video, and text channels by default is using the text option. Great. So I just wanted to modify that. And now we can go ahead and create our edit and delete options, as well as our actual on-click options, so they redirect somewhere. Great job so far. So before we move on, there are a couple of things that I want to fix before we actually do this edit and delete models. So first thing is that when I hover on the trash icon, it says the edit and it should say delete. So let's go ahead and let's resolve that. So I'm gonna go ahead and collapse everything here. I'm going inside of components, inside of server, and go ahead and pick the server channel right here and go ahead and find these two action tooltips. The edit one has the correct label, but the trash one should have the delete label like this. So let's go ahead and see that now. There we go. Now it says delete. Great. And what I notice is that when I switch to light mode, this sidebar seems to have the wrong color. Also, this one seems to be a bit too dark, and you can see that this plus icon is almost not noticeable. It doesn't have any border around it. So let's go ahead and let's quickly resolve that. So I'm going to zoom out just so I can see my sidebar at the same time. And let's close everything and let's go inside of components, navigation dash sidebar right here. All right, and I feel like we've made some mistakes here. So first thing that I notice here is that I have a background for the dark color, but I don't have it for the regular light mode. So after this dark BG color, go ahead and add regular BG, which is going to be a hex code of E3, E5, E8. 8 like this. There we go. So now after I save, there we go. That already looks a bit better. Let me zoom in. Yes, so now this is clearly separated from this one. Perfect. And even this looks better now. Great. So that's just one thing that I wanted to do. So every now and then, make sure to switch to your light and dark mode just to, make sure that everything is still working fine. Perfect. So now we can go ahead and create this edit and delete functions here. So let's go ahead and let's visit our use modal store hook. So I'm going to close everything and go inside of the hooks, use modal store right here. And after delete server, I'm going to go ahead and add delete channel like this. So that's going to be our new model. And let's go ahead and let's add a new option for the model data here, which is going to be channel. So it's an optional type of channel, and you can import channel from @prisma/client. So I have channel type, and server imported from Prisma client. Make sure you have those as well. Perfect. Now let me close everything and let's go inside of components, models, and I'm going to copy and paste the delete server model because it's the most similar one we can reuse. So let's paste it here, and I'm going to rename this copy to delete-channel-model like that. Go inside of that file, make sure you're inside, and rename this to delete channel model like that, and change this constant is model open to delete channel like this. Great. Now we can go back inside of the providers, model provider, and go all the way down and add the delete channel model like this. And let's just fix this. So add /components like this. There we go. Perfect. And now let's find a way to trigger that. So we have to go inside of components, inside of server, and pick the server channel right here. And let's go ahead and let's add our const on open from use model like right here. So inside of the server channel, and I added an import of use model from /hooks use model store right here, and I destructured this on open function. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and let's find this trash icon and go ahead and add on click to be an arrow function which calls the on open delete channel like this, and pass in the server and the channel like this. There we go. So we already have both server and channel from our props right here. So channel and server. So that is safe to do. And let's try that out now. So in here, I'm going to go and press delete. And there we go. We have a delete server prompt. So let's modify this delete server prompt to actually be the delete channel prompt. Perfect. Let's go inside of components, models, delete channel model right here. And alongside the server, let's immediately destructure the channel because we are going to need it here. Perfect. And now let's go ahead and let's change this from delete server to delete channel like this. We can leave the are you sure you want to do this, but instead of rendering the server.name, so let me just zoom out a bit so you can see inside of this span where we render the server.name, instead we're going to render channel.name like this, and I want to add a little hashtag before that so it indicates that it's a channel. So are you sure you want to do this? Hashtag new channel will be permanently deleted. So that looks good enough for me. And now let's go inside of this onClick function right here. And before we do anything, let's import our query string. So import QS from query -string like this. Let's go back inside of the onClick. And let's go ahead and let's write const URL to be qs.stringify URL. The URL is going to be backticks like this /API/channels/channel?id like that. And the query is gonna hold the server ID from params ?server ID like this. So let's go ahead and just add the params. So const params is equal to use params from next/navigation. All right, so now we have that. And let's go ahead now and let's change this to use this Axios right here. Perfect. And after we delete our channel, no need to go all the way to /. Instead, we can go to /servers/ params dot question mark dot server ID like this. Perfect. Great. So if I try this now, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get a 404 error here. So let me try that. There we go, a 404 error. And now let's go ahead and let's create this route. Before we go there, it actually seems to me that we are actually destructuring this server for no reason at all. Or the other thing, we are using params instead of using that server. So let's actually change that. So this should still work, but I don't want to use params if we don't need to. So let's remove the params like this. Let's remove the use params. And instead of using params.server ID, let's use this destructured server from here. So we're going to write server question mark dot ID like this. And same thing here. So server question mark dot ID. So both would work because we are only able to call these models when we are inside of server ID parameters. But still, let's follow some conventions. Let's be consistent. All right. And now let's go ahead and let's actually create that route. So I'm going to close everything. I'm going to go inside of the app folder. Inside of API, we already have the channels. So let's create a new folder, channel ID like this. And inside, go ahead and create route.ts like that. Perfect. Let's export asynchronous function delete like that, which is going to have a request. And it's going to have params, which are going to be an object which store the channel ID, which is a string like this. Perfect. Let's open our try and catch block. Let's log the error inside of channel underscore ID delete error like that. And let's return new next response from next/server internal error and pass in, the status of 500 like that. Great, so we've done this a couple of times already. Perfect, let's get the current profile. So profile is equal to await current profile, and make sure you import that here. If there is no profile, return new next response unauthorized with a status of 401 like this. Great. Now let's also get the search params from new URL request.url like that. And let's get the server ID from search params .get server ID like this. Great. So if there is no server ID, let's return new next response server ID missing with a status of 400 like that. And if there are no params channel ID, return new next response channel ID missing with a status of 400 like that. Perfect. And now let's actually delete the server. So let's go ahead and let's import db from add/libdb. So like this. And now let's go ahead and write const server is equal await db.server.update like that. And inside, let's go ahead and write where ID is server ID and members sum profile ID is equal to current profile.id, which we store in this profile variable. And a role of that member needs to be either a member role, import that from @prisma/client, like I did right here, and I'm just going to move it to the top. So it needs to be either an admin or member role.moderator like this, one of the two. Perfect. And then let's go ahead and add the data. Channels, delete. We're going to delete the channel by the ID of params.channel_ID and name not general. So we are never going to enable a deletion of the general channel, even if we send that channel's ID. It's like a security measure for us, even though in the front end we disable it. But remember what I said, front-end validation can easily be bypassed, and you always need to do the same on the server. So just write return next response.json server as well. Perfect. So if we try this, I think it should already work. So let me refresh right here. Let's check out this test audio. I'm going to click delete, confirm, and let's see if that's going to work. There we go. It's been deleted. Let's try with this text channel. If I delete it, there we go, that's deleted. Let's try with new video. If I delete that, that seems to be deleted as well. Perfect. All right, and now let's do the edit functionality here. So in order to do the edit functionality, we have to go back inside of our use model store right here, and after delete channel, add edit channel right here. All right, and we don't have to modify anything here. Instead, let's go inside of our components, inside of our models, and use the edit server model. Sorry, no, not that. Go ahead and find the create channel model. So that's the one that is the most similar to ours because it has the select options and stuff. And just change it to edit-channel-model like this. Make sure you are inside of that new file and rename this to edit channel model like this, and change this type to edit channel like that. Perfect. And now let's just go all the way to the bottom and change this from create to save like that. All right, and now let's go back inside of our components, providers, model provider, and at the bottom add edit channel model like that. From /models, edit channel model, and you already know I'm gonna modify that to /components. Perfect. And now let's go ahead back inside of components, server channel right here, and add to this edit icon on click to be an arrow function, which calls the on open like that, edit channel, and pass in the server and this channel like this. Perfect. So now if I try the edit, that should work as well. I just refreshed, clicked on edit, and there we go. We opened a create channel, and we're going to modify it to match the functionality of edit channel. So let's go back inside of the edit channel component, inside of components, models, edit channel model right here, and change the title from create channel to edit channel like this. Perfect. And now let's go ahead and find this use effect right here, and we're not gonna need this inside, so you can remove this. You can leave the form inside and just write if there is a channel, and we don't have that, so let's just do that quickly. So I'm going to remove this just so we don't get confused. So go back here to use model, we have data, go ahead and extract the channel and the server like this. And actually we are not going to have the channel type for this one, so you can remove that as well like that, and you can just remove this to be like that. Okay, so just channel and server from the data, and the default values are this, so a bit different than the create channel one. All right, now inside, go ahead and check if there is a channel. Form.setValue, name is going to be channel.name, and form.setValue of type is going to be channel.type like this. Great. And let's just see. Let's also add the channel here, so channel like that, and I think we can resolve this. Let me just explore a bit. So what we can do to resolve this is remove it from the default values, because we are going to fit it either way, but that seems to not work. Instead, let's try channel.type pipe like this and add a question mark here. There we go. That seems to have resolved it. Okay, so type can be either the initial channel.type or channel type.next. Great. So you might be wondering, why am I even doing a use effect? Why don't I just do channel type, channel.name here? Well, the problem is that this model is rendered before we receive this channel data right here. So it needs to be retriggered in the use effect, because this doesn't change dynamically. All right, so now I'm going to save this, and let's go ahead and let's try. So I will refresh this. Let me zoom out a bit. If I click on edit new audio, there we go. Channel type is new audio and channel type is audio. If I click on video, it says test video, channel type video. So it seems to work. Let's just create a new text channel just to test if it also works for that. So we have the new text channel. I'm going to click edit, I have the correct name and the correct type. Perfect. And what we have to do now is we have to modify the onSubmit function right here. So the onSubmit function is gonna actually be a bit different. So find the onSubmit QS stringify URL and add backticks /API/channels/channel?.id. And in the query, instead of using params, we are no longer gonna be using params here. So you can remove that and remove the import for use params. Instead of using that, we're going to use the server from our data.id. So we have this server destructured from the data because we are passing in from the server channel component. Perfect. And I think that should be it. Now, of course, if I try, we're going to get a 404 error. So let's say edited channel like this. I click save. There we go. Actually, it's 405 because we have that route and we don't allow this method. Okay, so now let's go ahead back inside of our channel ID. So I'm gonna close everything. Make sure you save those files. Go inside of the app folder, API, channels, channel ID, route.ts. So we already created this delete function, and let's just copy and paste the entire thing. So I'm gonna copy that and just below paste it, and let's rename this from delete to patch like this. Great, so it has the same params. And alongside search params, let's also add a name and type from await request.json like this, because we also need that. Perfect. And alongside checking for profile, server ID, and params.channel ID, let's also check if name is general. So if somehow they bypass the front-end validation, let's give them a return new next response. Name cannot be add single backticks, single ticks, general like that, with a status of 400 like this. Perfect. So let me just expand this a bit. Okay. And now let's go ahead. And in this server, what we are going to do is not delete it, but we are going to modify it. So this is correct. The where query can stay the same. And now let's go ahead and modify this data a bit. So I'm going to delete everything and write it again so it's easier. So channels update where ID is params.channel ID, not name general like that. So we cannot update the general. And let's go ahead and add the data, name, and type like this. There we go. And let's change this to channel ID patch like this. Great. All right, that seems to be okay. It seems I've triggered a error here, so let's see what that is about. Maybe you have that as well. Let's take a look at my terminal right here. Okay, so I'm just going to restart my application, npm run dev. Let's see if the error is still being triggered or if that was a one-time thing during my development. It seems to be a one-time thing during my development. Okay. And now let's go ahead and try this. So I have this new audio channel, and let's see if I can rename it to edited audio. So I'm going to click save. Okay, it seems like there was an error. Let's go ahead and check it out. So it still says the same thing. Interesting. Okay, we have a patch function here, correct? Yes, we do a patch function. Okay, so it should work. Let's see why it doesn't. I think it's because we left a post function inside of our model. So go inside of components, model, edit channel model right here. Let's go inside of the onSubmit. And yes, it is because we are doing axios.post when we should be doing axios.patch like this. So let's try this one more time. Let's change this to edited-audio and let's click save. And now it seems to be working. And there we go. This has changed to edited audio. Let's try with the text channel. Let's try general. It's not allowing us. Let's say edited text channel and click save. And now it's turned into edited text channel. Perfect. Let's see if I can do this new text, and I'm gonna change the type to text and save this. Let's see if that's gonna work. There we go. It's up with the text channels. Perfect. So we have the working delete. We have the working edit. Everything seems to be working exactly as we expect. We can also change this moderations from that shortcut that we added, this little icon right here. Perfect. And everything here seems to be matching as well. Perfect. So we are finally ready to start creating our chat headers and chat messages and chat inputs, and slowly, and also of course video chats, right? So we are ready to do that now. Great job so far. So now let's go ahead and let's actually create this actions when we click on channels and members, that we actually get redirected not to the server ID page, but either the channel page or the conversation page. So let's go ahead and let's revisit our server channel first. So go inside of components, server channel right here. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna add an onClick function. So const onClick, like this, and go ahead and just write router, which we have right here. Make sure you have use router from next navigation inside of the server channel component. Router.push open backticks /servers /params .server ID /channels /open object channel.id, like this. And then we have to add that onClick to this empty arrow function in the button. Perfect. So if you go ahead and try now and click on any channel, you're gonna get redirected to a 404 page. Perfect. Well, not perfect, but we're gonna fix it. One thing I wanna bring your attention to is that if I try and edit, a modal opens and then I get redirected. That's because this global button on click right here, right? Let me just expand my screen, is overriding this clicks inside on the edit and the trash. So let's go ahead and let's do this now. I'm gonna go ahead and write const on action, and we're gonna accept event, which is react.mouse event, and an action, which is a modal type. And you can import that from /hooks modal store. So if you cannot import it, make sure that you have the export in front of type modal type, like that. So just import the modal type alongside use modal from /hooks use modal store and confirm that you have the export in front of type modal type. So now we get access to all of this here. Let's go back to our on action here. And let's go ahead and write event.stop propagation, like that. And then on open action, so we know which model to open dynamically, and let's pass in the channel and the server as the data. And now let's use this on action instead of using this right here. So instead of calling on open here in the edit, go ahead and just call on action and pass in the edit channel like this. Let's see if that is correct. What did I just write? Oh, an event as well. My apologies. So an event, pass in an event, comma, edit channel, like that. And same thing here, get the event from the arrow function and replace this with on action, pass in the event. And what is this one? This one is delete channel, like this. Great, so let's try that now. And now I should not get over right. So if I click on edit, there we go. No redirect. If I click on delete, no redirect. But if I specifically click on a channel, I get a 404. So that's exactly what I wanted to do here. And I think I noticed one slight mistake here. And that is inside of our components server member right here, if I remember correctly. So in the button, I'm comparing params.memberID to be equal to member.id, but right here I'm using params.channelID to check for member ID. So let's just change that. So above the user avatar, in this paragraph which renders the member profile name, change the dynamic class to look for member ID instead of the channel ID. So you won't be able to see any differences yet. That's because we have not created any of these classes. So all of them lead to 404. And now let's go ahead and let's add the onClick inside of this server member, because right now I can click as much as I want and nothing happens. So we are inside of that server member right here. And let's go ahead and let's add an onClick function. So const onClick is an arrow function which calls the router.push So make sure you have the router and use router from next navigation. And it calls router.push/servers/params.server ID. Add a question mark here. /conversations/member.id, like that. Perfect. And let's go ahead and add this on click on this button here, like that. Perfect. So now if I try and click on members, I get to a 404 page. So we did a very simple on-click function and added it to the button that holds our user avatar and the name of the member. Perfect. So we can now go ahead and actually create a very simple page, just like we have with this server ID page. And instead it's going to render the channel ID page or the conversation ID page. So let's go inside of our main folder. So I'm going to close everything, just remember to save your files. Go inside of app folder, main, routes, and we have the server ID here. So let's go ahead inside and create a new folder called channels, like that. And inside create another folder in square brackets channel ID, like that. And inside create a new file page.tsx, like this. So main, routes, server ID, channels, individual channel ID. And let's just go ahead and add channel ID page, like that, and a div channel ID page, like this. Perfect. So now if you go ahead and try and click on general, you should no longer get a 404. Instead, the general should be selected like this, and in the URL you should see the /channels and the ID, and you should see the channel ID page. And same thing for this other channels right here. Perfect. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for the conversations now, aka the members. So I'm gonna collapse everything, go inside of app, main, routes, inside the server ID, create a new folder called conversation, like that. And inside create a new folder called in square brackets member ID, like this. And inside a new page.tsx, which is just going to be member ID page with a div member ID page, like this. Great. And now if you click on this one, all right, we are still getting a 404, and I think I know why. Yes, I named this folder conversation when it should be conversations, multiple of them. Great. And now I think it should automatically, there we go. So you can see how it looks now. You can see how it's that selected. Very nice. Perfect. Let's go ahead and switch to light mode to see if this is still okay. And it seems to be looking good. Great. So I'm going to continue in dark mode to save my eyes. One more thing that I want to do now is that I'm going to remove my URL. Let me just click here. There we go. So you can just click on your server. I don't want this state to exist, so I always want user to immediately be redirected to the first channel we can find, which in our case is always going to be the general channel, because we don't allow anyone to delete this general channel. So whenever I refresh on this server ID or just click on this, I want to be immediately put into a general channel. So let's go ahead and do that now. So let's go inside, well, let me close everything. Let's go inside of our app folder, inside of main, routes, inside of server ID, and find the page.tsx that currently just says server ID page. And inside of here, let's go ahead and let's turn this into a asynchronous function. And let's go ahead and give it an interface of server ID page props. And it's going to accept params of server ID, which is a string like this. And let's go ahead and let's extract those params here, and let's add them to the props server ID page props, like this. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's fetch the current profile. So const profile is equal to await current profile from s/lib current profile, like that. Of course, make sure you don't accidentally have use client at the top. So this is a server component. If there is no profile, we can redirect, return a redirect to sign in from clerk like this. So make sure you import redirect to sign in from clerk like that. And I'm just going to separate these two imports. So that's if we don't have a profile. All right, and now let's go ahead and let's attempt to find this server. So const server is equal to await db, which you can import from /libdb like I did right here. db.server.find unique like this, where id is params.server id, members, some have a profile ID of the current profile.id, so we are confirming that we are a member of this profile. And let's go ahead and add include channels where, and let's find the general channel using the name general like this. So this is why we don't allow users to rename this channel or delete it, because we need it to redirect the user. And let's order created at ascending like this. Great. And now let's go ahead and write const initial channel to be server dot channels and pick the first one like this. And if initial channel dot name is not general, so make sure you don't misspell general here, in that case return null. So this should technically never happen, but just in case, we're just going to display an empty page, even though it should absolutely never happen. And instead of this return a redirect from next/navigation. So make sure you import redirect from next/navigation like that. And return a redirect /servers /params.server id /channels and /initial channel dot id. And let me just expand this so you can see it in one line and maybe zoom out. There we go. So we find the initial channel, we check if the initial channel name is general. If it is, we go ahead and redirect the user to server id /channels /that initial channel .id. And there we go. You can see that now, no matter how many times I refresh or if I click on this right here, oh, maybe it's not working. Let me try and refresh again. Okay, it seems to not be working. Let's go ahead and explore why. So I'm not exactly sure, because this server ID page, I don't think this even exists in the code. So this could be some cache. Or maybe I didn't save this file. Maybe it's that. Okay, it was that. I didn't save my file. Okay, so now you can see that if I try and click on my server, you can look at my URL, how it's immediately redirecting to the initial channel. And yeah, I can go ahead and remove the /channels and just leave the server ID, and you will see that I'm immediately redirected back to the general channel. Perfect. So this is exactly what I wanted to do. Exactly that. Perfect. And now we can go ahead and finally start developing the header for our chat, the body for our chat, the input for our chat, the messages, the videos, the audios, everything else. Great job so far. So let's go ahead and let's create our chat header component, which is going to be displayed right here at the top. So in order to do that, the first thing we have to do is we have to go inside of our channel ID page. So I'm going to close everything just so we repeat our knowledge of our folder structure. So we're going to go inside of the app folder, main folder, routes, server, server ID, and our newly created channels folder, which holds the individual channel ID right here, and choose that page.tsx. So what we have to do in here is we have to load the current channel using the ID which we have, and we have to load the current member. So let's go ahead and let's turn this into a asynchronous function like this. And let's go ahead and let's create the props for this channel ID page. So interface channel ID page props like that. It's going to have params, and inside of those params, we are going to have a server ID, which is a string. And let me just zoom in a bit. And channel ID, which is also a string. So how do I know that we are going to have both the server ID and the channel ID? Well, because of the folder structure. So we are inside of server ID and we are inside of channel ID, which means both of those are going to be inside of our URL. So as long as you've named them correctly, you're going to have them inside of every server component inside of of this structure. So now that we know that we have those, let's go ahead and let's extract the params from the props and let's just map them to channel ID page props so our typing is correct. Great, and now let's go ahead and let's fetch the current profile. So const profile is equal to await current profile from /lib current profile, like I added at the top right here. If we don't have a profile, we can go ahead and return redirect to sign in from clerk. So just go ahead and write this and make sure you have imported this from clerk next.js, and as always I'm going to separate those two imports. Great, now we can go ahead and import our database util. So import db from /lib db like this, and let's go ahead and let's fetch our channel using the ID. So const channel is equal to await db.channel.find unique like this, and let's go ahead and write where ID is equal to params.channel ID like this. Great. And now let's write const member is equal to await db.member.find first like this, where server ID is equal to params.server ID and profile ID is equal to profile.id like this. Perfect. So we fetched the channel which holds this ID, and we found a member using a server ID and its respective profile ID. So there can be many members with this profile ID, but the member we want to find is one that is inside of this server and holds this profile ID. Because remember, a profile can have as many members as it wants. So whenever we join a new server, we become a new member of that server, but that is still the same profile ID. So to identify the one member we want to find, we also have to specify the server ID. So that's why we are using find first and not find unique, because we have not specified in the schema that these two fields need to be unique. Perhaps we should have done that, but let's go ahead and let's continue developing with what we have. Great. So let's go ahead and now write if there is no channel, or if there is no member. In that case, we can redirect from next/navigation. So make sure you import redirect from next/navigation, and I'm going to move it to the top. And let's go ahead and redirect the user back to slash, because they're trying to access a channel that they don't have access to. Great, and now that we have this, let's go ahead and let's write a class name here with bg-white on light mode, and on dark mode we're gonna have bg-open square brackets and a hashtag of 3133338 like this. So 3133338 like that. I added a one extra 3 if you didn't notice, but I removed it. Great. And a flex-col and h-full like this. Great, so let's see. I'm not even sure if the color has slightly changed or not, but anyway, this is how I want it to look like. Now inside of here, let's go ahead and let's remove this text and let's write chat header like this. And once you save, you're going to get an error because chat header does not exist. So let me just refresh this page to make sure it's loading. There we go. So chat header is not defined. Make sure you have your app running. Let's go ahead and let me close everything, and let's go inside of components and create a new folder called chat. And inside here, we're going to hold all of our chat components. So create a new file, chat-header.psx like this. Let's go ahead and let's import hash from Lucid React because we're going to need that. And let's go ahead and let's just quickly fix the error. So export const chat header like this and return a div saying chat header like that. Let's go back inside of our page, which is located inside of the app folder all the way to the channel ID page here. And now we can safely import this from add/components chat header. Great. And now if you save this file, you should not see an error anymore. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's create an interface for this. So interface chat header props are going to have a server ID, which is a string, a name, which is a string, a type, which is going to be either a channel or a conversation, Because remember, we are going to reuse all of our chat components for both the channel view, the video or audio channel view, and also for direct one-on-one member conversation view. So we have to adapt the props to change the UI appropriately. And an image URL, which is going to be an optional string like this. Great. So let's go ahead and let's extract all of those here. So server ID, name, type, and image URL. And let's go ahead and map those to chat header props like this. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's give this div a class name of text-md font-semi-bold. And let me just expand my screen so we can see as much as possible in one line. So font-semi-bold, px-3, flex, items-center, h-12, border-neutral-200, on dark mode, border-neutral-800, and border-b-2 like that. Perfect. So let's go ahead and let's see how that looks now. And there we go. You can see that we finally have this little chat header here that matches the height of this drop down right here. Perfect. And if you're wondering, well, when comes the time that we actually enable the mobile view, where this is where we're gonna hold that little toggle button. So let's go ahead and let's just add it here now. So I'm gonna go ahead and write menu from Lucid React right here. So make sure you import the menu here. And there we go. So that's how that is going to look like. Of course, now it's not functional, but later we are going to turn it into a component, which is going to trigger a drawer, which is going to hold this navigation sidebar and this server sidebar. So that's how we are going to handle mobile. But before we get there, let's go ahead and let's write a dynamic render here. So type is equal to channel. In that case, let's go ahead and return a hashtag like this, and let's go ahead and give it a class name of w-5h-5 text-sync-500. Dark mode is gonna have text-sync-400 and margin right of 2 like this. And right now we're not seeing anything. That's because we have not passed any props to this chat header. So let's go back inside of our page, which renders the chat header, and let's just give it some props. So I'm gonna give it a name of channel.name. I'm gonna give it a server ID of channel.server ID. And I'm going to give it a type of channel like this, because we are using this chat header for rendering our channel. And there we go. You can see how a little hashtag has appeared right here. So let's go ahead and let's continue the development here. After this hash right here, let's go ahead and let's add a paragraph, which is going to render the name like this. And let's go ahead and give this a class name of of font semi-bold, text-md, and text-black, and on dark mode, text-white like this. There we go. Great. So we are not entirely done with this chat header, but we're going to continue the development of it when we enable our one-on-one conversations. So obviously it's okay that it says general for stuff like this, for these channels. You can see all of this is correct. When I click on new text, it says new text. On general, it says general. On edited audio, it says edited audio. But when I click here, we're going to modify this a little bit. Instead of showing a hashtag, we're going to show the actual user image and some other stuff. But we're going to come to that later. What I actually want to do now is I want to create the mobile toggle button. So I'm going to turn this icon of menu into an actual working toggle. So in order to do that, we have to add another component from ShadCN. So let's go ahead to ShadCN documentation and find the component under S sheet right here. There we go. And let's go ahead and copy the command it needs using npm like that. I'm going to go inside of my terminal here. I will shut down the application and I'm going to write npx ShadCN UI at latest add sheet like this. Great. And just confirm this installation like this, and you can npm run dev your application again. Great. Now let's go ahead And let's go and close everything and go inside of your components and create a new file called mobile-toggle.tsx. So outside of any folder except the components folder. And let's go ahead and let's write export const mobile toggle. Is going to be a simple function, which is going to return for now. Let's add that menu icon from Lucid React like that. So very simple. And now we're going to go back inside of our chat folder, find the chat header and replace the menu icon with mobile toggle like this from /mobile toggle, or in my case, I'm going to replace it to /components and separate the two, and we can remove the import for menu from here. And right now, everything should say exactly the same because that's the only thing we added in the mobile toggle. So now let's go ahead and let's import everything we need from our new sheet component. So go ahead and import sheet content like that, and sheet trigger like this from @/components/UI/sheet like this. Great. And now let's go ahead and replace this with sheet like this inside a sheet trigger, which is going to have as child prop. And inside, we're going to add a button from ./UI button. So make sure you add this import, and I'm going to replace it to /components like this. So it's going to be a button which is going to render our menu icon. And let's give this button a variant of ghost, a size of icon, and a class name of MD hidden. So we only want this to show on mobile devices. Perfect. And below the sheet trigger here, add a sheet content like that. Let's go ahead and give it some props. So a side is going to be left. Class name is going to be padding-0, flex, and gap-0 like this. Perfect. So inside of this content, let's go ahead and create a div element with a class name of w-open square brackets 72 pixels like that. And inside, you're going to render the navigation sidebar from /navigation sidebar. I'm just going to replace that to /components like this. So we get the navigation sidebar from the navigation folder. And we're also going to add a server sidebar from /server sidebar like this. And let's just replace this to components as well. Perfect. So let me just zoom out a bit so you can see it in one line. So we got the navigation sidebar from /components navigation/navigation sidebar, as it is inside of this folder, the navigation sidebar, and same thing with the server sidebar inside of components server folder. So server, and we have the server sidebar right here. And one thing that is missing inside of here is the server ID, which means we are also going to need the server ID from the mobile toggle. So let's go ahead and just quickly add the server ID here, and let's map the props to it. So server ID is a type of string like this, and then we can safely pass the server ID here as well. Perfect. So now let's go back inside of our chat header component where we render the mobile toggle, and let's go ahead and pass in the server ID to be server ID like this. There we go. So you can see now when I expand, and let me just refresh to make sure all of this is up to date. Let's just wait a second for this to load for me, and there we go. You can see that now, when I have this active in desktop view, I don't have the mobile toggle. But when I collapse it, it becomes active. And if I click, you can see that the drawer opens. Amazing. So exactly what we wanted, and I can change the channels from here like this. I can trigger a model to create my own server, create my own channel. Perfect. So exactly what we wanted for mobile view. And we don't have to worry that this mobile toggle is all the way here in this chat header, because remember, we do a redirect. Whenever a user joins a server, we immediately join the general channel here. So they're always going to be, if they're on mobile, they're always going to see this button right here to trigger this. Perfect. So we have successfully wrapped up a big part of chat header, and now what we have to do is modify this chat header to match our one-on-one conversation view. So when I click on Antonio here, I want it to show the same chat header but a little bit modified. So it's time for us to wrap up our Prisma schema. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm gonna close everything and I'm gonna go inside of the Prisma folder schema.prisma right here. So far we've added the server model, the profile model, member, and the channel model. But we also have a couple of more models missing from here. So let's go ahead and let's create the model message like this. It's gonna have an ID, which is a string ID, and a default value of UUID like this. It's gonna have content, which is a string of db.text, so we allow long messages. We're gonna have an optional file URL, which is an optional string, so we add a question mark at the end with also a db.text because URLs can get pretty long. Let's create a connection with the member ID who will send this message like this and write a member at relation like this, fields, member ID, references ID, and on delete is going to be cascade like this. Let's see if I can expand my screen a bit more. And I seem to have made a typo here. So let me zoom out. There we go, like this. And now we have to add this relation back to the member. So let's go ahead and find the member right here. And after the server ID here, let's go ahead and add messages to be a message like this. There we go. And now you should no longer have this error right here. Perfect, but that's not the only relation we need. We also need a relation with the channel this message is being sent to. So channel ID is a string and a relation of channel at relation, fields, channel ID, references, ID, and on delete, cascade like this. So let me zoom out so you can see that. And now we have to go ahead back into the channel and add the relation. So let's find the channel. It's right here. And after server ID, go ahead and add messages, message like this. Perfect. And let me just go ahead back to the member here. And let's write these messages with the lowercase m, so messages like this. There we go, perfect. And now before we wrap this entire thing up, let's also add a deleted boolean. So deleted is a boolean with a default value of false. So we're going to use a soft delete method. Once a user attempts to delete the message, we're not going to remove the record from our database, but we're going to clear the content and we're going to turn this to true. And let's also add at index to be a channel ID and at index to be a member ID like this. And let's also go ahead and write created at to be date time of default and now, and updated at to be a date time at default, at updated at like this. Perfect. So we've wrapped up our message model, which will be for the channels. Now we have to create a conversation model and a direct message model. So let's go ahead below that and write model conversation, which is going to have an ID of string at ID at default UUID like this. And now it's going to have two members. So member one ID is going to be a string and member one is going to be a relation to the member. But since we already have a couple of relations to the member, we have to give this one a name. So relation, and go ahead and write member one like this and pass in the fields, which are member one ID, and pass in the references, which is an ID, and on delete cascade like this. Perfect. And do the same thing for member two. So I'm going to copy and paste this. And let's rename this to member 2 ID like this. And this one is going to be member 2. And this relation is going to be member 2 as well. And everything else can stay the same. Actually not. So we have to change this fields array to member 2 ID like this. Great. And now let's go ahead and let's find our member model. And let's just add these relations here. So to the conversation model using this member 1 and member 2. So go ahead and find the conversation model. Sorry, not the conversation model, the member model right here. And below the messages, go ahead and add conversations initiated like this to be a conversation like this, and a relation of member 1 like this. So can I zoom in? I can. Great. And we also need another one, which is going to be, so you can copy this, but this one is going to be called conversations received like this. And this one is going to be member 2 like this. So we created a relation back to the conversation model using the member 1 and member 2 fields, and in here we're going to store them as conversations we initiated and conversations we received like this. So we can handle both being the person who created a conversation with another member and also a person who got invited for a one-on-one conversation by some other member. So we need to handle both of those cases. Perfect. And now let's go ahead back inside of our conversation model here. And what we have to do here is just fix this warnings. So go ahead and add that index right here for member 1 ID and add that index for member 2 ID like this. And also, let's go ahead and let's write add that unique, and let's write a combination of member 1 ID and a member 2 ID like this. Perfect. So each conversation can only exist with a unique member 1 and member 2 ID. So we cannot have more than we cannot have 2 of these conversations with the exact same members, because in every server we're going to have a different member ID ourselves, and the other user is also going to have a different member ID themselves. Perfect. And let me actually see if I even need an index for this one. It seems like I don't, right? So it seems like it's only asking for the member 2. So let's remove this member 1 ID. It seems like the only thing we need is the member 2 ID. If you're having issues, you can just add both of them. But as you can see, when I remove the 2, this is the error, the warning. But when I remove the 1, there's no warning. So I can keep it like this. So let me just zoom out one more time so you can see how it looks in one line like that. Perfect. And we are not done yet. So what we have to do now is we have to create our last model, which is going to be direct message model. So the reason we have to create a different model and we cannot reuse this message one is because this message one is best to keep separated and only used for the channel relation. You can see that we have pretty strict channel relations here. So we can go ahead and create a very similar one called direct message, which is going to be used inside of one-on-one conversations with the members. So let's go ahead and write model direct message like that, which is going to have an ID of string at ID and default of UUID like this. It's going to have content, which is a string, and db.text, and it's going to have file URL, which is an optional string, and db.text like this. Now let's add a relation to the member ID, which is a string, and member, which is going to be a member relation fields, member ID, references, ID, and on delete cascade like this. So let me zoom out so you can see it. Great. And we're also going to have a relation to the conversation we are in. So conversation ID is a string, and conversation like this, add relation fields, conversation ID, references ID, and on delete cascade like this. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and let's go inside of our conversation here. And below this member 2, let's go ahead and add direct messages to be direct message and an array like this. And that way we fix the error for this one. And now we have to go all the way to the member to add a relation with the direct message. So find the member right here, and you can go just below messages and just add direct message like this, direct message, and make sure this is direct messages like this, so multiple. Perfect. So we have a relation with both of those now, and we can go back safely inside of our direct message here. And let's go ahead and zoom in back, and let's wrap this up by adding it a created at field, which is a date time of a default value of now, an updated at, which is date time, at updated at, like this. And it's also going to have a deleted, which is a boolean with a default value of false. And let's just not misspell this, so boolean. And let me just move it above these dates like that. And lastly, let's just create these two indexes to fix these errors. So at index is going to be a member ID, and at index is going to be a conversation ID, like this. Perfect. So make sure you have no errors and no warnings. You can always go to my GitHub and just copy the entire Prisma schema. And now let's go ahead and push all of that. So save that file. Let's shut down the application, run npx prisma generate to add all of these new models to our node modules, and npx prisma db push to push those new collections to our Planetscale or whatever you used for your MySQL database. There we go. So all of that is ready. And now we are ready to modify our individual member page. So when I click on members, did I start this? Let me just go ahead and start the application. So npm run dev, like this. Let's just wait a second for this to load. So basically what we're gonna do now is similar to the channels. We have this chat header, which says the general channel. We're gonna do that now, but for the member ID page. And we can do that now because we have all the necessary models to create conversations and then load the other member's name in here, right? When I click on this user, I expect their user to show. Perfect. So let's continue. And first thing we want to do is create a util for finding our one-on-one conversations or creating our one-on-one conversations. So what is the flow that's going to happen once I click on this member right here? So we're going to check whether we already have a one-on-one conversation with this user, with this member, or if we don't, we're going to go ahead and create one, because as opposed to channels, which are immediately created and everyone can be a part of them, members don't work like that. So we are only going to create a one-on-one conversation if anyone ever clicked on that user. Great. So let's go ahead inside of our lib folder and create a new file called conversation.ts, like this. Great. And let's go ahead and let's create two functions here first. So what I want to do is import our database from ./db, and I think you already know I'm going to replace that to @libdb, like this. Perfect. So let's go ahead and first create our find conversation function. So const find conversation, like this, is going to be an asynchronous function. I'm just going to zoom out just a bit, like this, which is going to take the member1 ID, which is a string, and it's going to take a member2 ID, which is also a string, like this. And that's going to be an arrow function. So this is how it should look like in one line. And inside, let's go ahead and write return await db.conversation.find first, like this, where, and like that, open an array, open an object. Member1 ID is equal to member1 ID from our params, and member2 ID is equal to member2 ID from our params right here. And once we find that user, that conversation, let's include the entirety of member1, including their profile, so we can load their name and image, and same thing for member2. So include and also a profile true, like this. Perfect. So we immediately return this await function in the find conversation. Great. And now let's create another function, const create new conversation, which is an asynchronous arrow function, which takes in member1 ID, a member2 ID, and it is an arrow function. And this is how it looks like in one line. Great. And inside of here, we're going to open a try and catch block. Inside of this catch, we don't have to log any errors. Instead, we can just return null, like this. And let's go ahead and write return await db.conversation.create, like this, data member 1 ID, member 2 ID, like this. So this is a shorthand, right? This is the same thing as writing this, just using a shorthand. And let's also include the member 1, and let's include their profile true like this, and same thing for member 2, include their profile to be true like this. Perfect. And let's go ahead and let's just wrap this find conversation inside a try and catch block as well. So I'm gonna head and write a try block here, wrap this entire thing, and in the catch block I will just return null like this. There we go. Just in case something goes wrong, we safely return null instead of blocking the entire application. So now we have these two functions, create new conversation and find conversation, but we're not using them anywhere. So at the top, create a new function, which we are going to export. So export const get or create conversation, which is an asynchronous function, which takes in the member 1 ID, which is a string, and a member 2 ID, which is a string like that. Perfect. And let's go ahead and write let conversation is equal to await find conversation using a member 1 ID and a member 2 ID. And let me just zoom out. So first thing, we're going to try a combination where the first member is the member 1 and the second one is the member 2. But we're also going to do a pipe await find the conversation of member 2 ID and a member 1 ID like this. So we have a combination of the two, right? If we cannot find it in this order, we go ahead and try to find it in a reverse order like that. Perfect. So all of this is written in one line, as you can see right here. I know it's zoomed out, but I just want to show you how it's supposed to look. Great. And if there is still no conversation after both of those combinations, that means that we have to create a new conversation. So conversation is now equal to await create new conversation, member 1 ID and a member 2 ID like this. Perfect. And at the end, just return the conversation like this. Perfect. So if you have a feeling you've done something wrong here, you can always just visit my GitHub and find this in lib conversation and confirm. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's find our member ID page. So I'm going to close this. I'm going inside of the app folder, main, routes, server ID, find the conversation, member ID, and find the page.tsx. Perfect. Let's go ahead and let's create the interface for this. So interface member ID page is going to have params, which are going to have a member ID, which is a string, and a server ID, which is also a string like this. Let's go ahead and extract those params right here. And let's add the member ID page. And I made a mistake here, so let's name this props, member ID page props and member ID page props, so it doesn't get conflicted with this constant right here. Perfect. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and write const profile to be await current profile from @/lib current profile, which means we have to turn this page into an asynchronous function like that. If there is no profile, we can return, let me zoom in, redirect to sign in from @/clerk. So make sure you have this. And as always, I'm going to separate those two. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's find the current member. So const current member is equal to await db, which you can import from @/lib db. So make sure you add this line right here. db.member.find first, like this, where server ID is equal to params.server ID and profile ID is equal to profile.id. So that is the current member, and we're also going to include our profile inside like this. Perfect. If there is no current member, in that case something is going wrong, and let's go ahead and return redirect from next/navigation to a /page like this. So I'm just going to move the redirect to the top. Perfect. And after this, let's go ahead and let's get our conversation using our new library. So const conversation is going to be await get or create conversation from @lib/conversation. So I imported that right here, and let me just move it to the top. So get or create conversation, which we just created here. Perfect. Let's go ahead and write get or create conversation and pass in the current member.id as the first ID and pass in the params.member.id as the other user. So this is how that looks in one line. Great. So we are looking at a combination of our currently logged in user and the member that we clicked on, and then we're gonna find the both combinations, whether we initiated that conversation or they initiated it, or if none of those combinations, let's go ahead and create a new one with us as the initiator because we pass in our prop as the first one. Perfect. And now let's go ahead and write if there is no conversation. So if something went wrong here, in that case, we cannot load this page. So we're gonna do a return redirect open pointy brackets /servers, and let's just go to params.serverID, which is going to automatically join the general channel. Perfect. And if we did manage to create a new conversation or find one, in that case, let's extract the member1, the member2 from conversation like this. Perfect. And let's find const other member is equal to member1.profileid is equal to profile.id like this. In that case, we are member2, otherwise, sorry, the other member is member2, otherwise it's member1. So basically what we are doing is we are comparing both member1 and member2. We are looking at their profile ID, and if it matches our current profile ID, we are picking the opposite member because I want to get the other member from this two. Perfect. I don't know which one is going to be us and which one is going to be the person we are talking to, right? Because either they could have initiated this conversation or we could have initiated it. If we initiated it, then we are the member one. Otherwise, they are. Since we have no way of knowing that information using this code, what we have to do after we extract those two from our found or created conversation is that we use the member one profile ID, compare it with our own, and if that matches, that means we are member one. So the other member is assigned to member 2. Otherwise, we are the member 1. Great. And now we can go ahead and add a div here with a class name of bg-white. Dark is going to have bg-#313338 like this. Flex-call, and h-full like this. Perfect. And instead of rendering member ID page, you're going to render the chat header from @components/chat/chat header. And let's pass in the image URL, which is going to be the other member.profile.image URL like this. The name is going to be other member.profile.name like that. Server ID is going to be params.serverID, and type is going to be conversation like this. Perfect. So now if I refresh right here, there we go. My conversation was successfully created and it says Antonio Erdeiras here, but my picture is not showing here because we have to go back inside of the chat header and resolve that. So let me show you what just happened. So I'm going to open a new terminal and I'm going to run npx Prisma Studio here. After I wrote that, I have opened my Prisma Studio inside, and I'm going to go ahead and open my conversations right here. And you can see that a new one was created, having the member one to be, let's see which member. I assume myself. There we go, the admin, which is tied to this profile, and another one, which is the guest. Perfect. So you can check in your Prisma Studio if that was correct. If it wasn't correct, so if you're for some reason not being able to see this name, go ahead and check inside of your terminal, not in the Prisma Studio, so where you're running the application, and scroll up and try to see if there are any error messages here. Right? If there are, go ahead and try to debug what just happened. And one piece of advice I might give you, after we've edited our Prisma schema, make sure that you shut down your application and rerun it again, because even if you do npx prisma generate and db push, there is still cache left in the next cache and all of that stuff. So make sure you shut down the application, run it again, and then try this. So mine worked from the first try. If yours hasn't and you are not able to debug, you can always visit my GitHub and go ahead step by step and see the differences between my what's it called, get or create conversation function, my Prisma schema, and find the differences. And if you still can't do that, you can always jump in my Discord and ask your question there. Everything can be resolved. Perfect. So now that we have this, we can go back and visit our chat header. So let's go ahead and visit our components, chat header here. And now let's finally use this image URL right here. So let's go ahead. And after this type channel hash, let's go ahead and write type is equal conversation. In that case, let's go ahead and write user avatar. And let's import this from /user avatar. And I'm going to change that to /components like this. And go ahead and pass in the source, which is going to be the image URL, and go ahead and give it a class name of h-8 w-8 on MD. Keep the same values like this, and margin right off to like this. So let's go ahead and let's refresh this and see if anything changed, and there we go. You can see that now it matches the member that I'm talking to right here in the corner. Perfect. So you can see how now I differentiate between my channels and between my members. And you can also look at the URL. When I'm in a channel, it is /channels channel ID. When I'm in the members, it is /conversation, that specific member ID that I am talking to. Perfect. So for the other user, they're going to have a different URL. They're going to have /conversations and then my user ID, because they are talking to me, right? So they're not going to share the URL, but because of our conversation lib, which we created, we are able to find all kinds of combinations of those two users. Perfect. Great job. So you successfully wrapped up the main functionalities of initiating pages of channels and the members. What we have to do now is we have to implement socket.io, so we can add a little indicator here in the top whether we are successfully connected to the WebSocket server or not. And regardless if you succeed in doing that or not, it doesn't matter, because then we're going to start doing the messages, and those messages can either work with a successful WebSocket combination, or they can work with polling. So regardless of what your experience is in this next part of the tutorial, which can be a little bit tricky because Next 13 has some problems with WebSockets, regardless of that, you will be able to have a real-time-ish experience in this app. Great job so far. So let's go ahead and let's create our socket.io connection. In order to do that, we're first gonna have to install a couple of packages. So let's shut down our application. I'm also gonna close this Prisma Studio terminal. I no longer need it. And let's go ahead and let's run npm install socket.io like this. And after this has been installed, let's go ahead and immediately install npm socket.io-client like this. So we need one for the server and one for the frontend. Great. And you actually don't need to run your application right now because we're going to do some coding. So let's go ahead and let's create a new folder. So outside of everything, we're going to create a new folder called Pages. So Pages is an old way of routing with Next 12, but since Next 13 app router still has some issues with socket.io, we're gonna leverage the fact that this Pages folder is still supported, and in here we're gonna go and initialize our IO connection. And you don't have to worry about Pages being deprecated or something. So Next 13 is still in an early transition, and I am sure that because of all the legacy code and applications, the Pages folder will be supported for a very long time, so you don't have to worry. And when an update comes that socket.io is able to be done in the app folder, I'm gonna create instructions on how to do that. But for now, using the pages folder is perfectly fine for this solution. So let's go inside of this pages folder, create a new folder called API, and inside go ahead and create another folder called socket. Inside of this socket folder, create a file io.ts like this. So that's going to be our route /API/sockets/io. So in the pages folder, we don't use the route.ts. Instead, we name our file as we want our route to be. Great. So let's go ahead and let's import server as net server from HTTP. Let's import next API request from next like this, and let's import server as server IO from socket.io like this. And now let's save this file, and before we continue, let's go inside of our types.ts file where we have this server with members with profiles, and let's go ahead and add some other imports here. So I'm gonna add import server as net server and socket from net like this, and let's import next API response from next like this, and let's also import server as socket.io server from socket.io. So we're gonna create a custom response type so we can use it inside of this pages route. Perfect. So let's go ahead and let's write export type next API response server IO is equal to next API response and socket, which is a type of socket, and server is a type of net server, and inside we have an IO, which is socket IO server like this. Perfect. So now that we have that, we can head back into our io.ts file inside of the pages API socket folder right here, and let's import next API response server IO from /types like this. Let's go ahead and turn off the body parser for this route. So export const config API body parser is false like this. And now let's write const IO handler to have a request of next API request like this, and the response of next API response server IO like this. Let's open an arrow function, and first let's check if we already have a REST socket server IO. So we are only going to write this code if there is no, so put an exclamation point, if there is no response.socket.server.io like this. And then let's go ahead and write const path to be /API/socket/IO like that. Const HTTP server is a type of net server, and it's a type of rest.socket.server as any like this. And now let's write const IO is equal to new server IO, in the first argument passing the HTTP server like this, and in the second one going ahead and pass the path to be path and add trailing slash to be false. Now, I am not exactly sure why, but this property is throwing me a TypeScript error, but I've seen in other projects it doesn't, and I've also confirmed that it's not due to the version I have, so I'm not sure if you're gonna have this TypeScript error or not. I have it, so what I'm gonna do is add a comment ts-ignore like this, because this is actually working for me. There is a difference if I add this and if I don't add this. So it's not true that this doesn't exist as a property here. You can even go ahead and look at the types inside. I think we have this server options inside, which extends the engine options. Let's go ahead and see if I can look at this, and somewhere inside you should have the trailing slash. Well, I cannot find it right now, but when I looked at myself, it was somewhere inside, but for some reason it's not being passed here. So again, I don't know if you're gonna have this error or not, but make sure you have the add trailing slash false. So don't misspell it because you don't have TypeScript autocomplete here. And let's just write response.socket.server.io to be IO like that. Perfect. And at the end, response.end like this. And export default IO handler like that. Perfect. So we have our API ready to connect to the socket IO. And now let's go ahead and close this and let's go inside of our components providers and create a new file inside called socket-provider.tsx like that. Go ahead and mark this as use client like that. Go ahead and import create context, use effect, and use state from React like this. And go ahead and import IO as client IO from socket.io-client. Now let's create the type for our context. So type socket context type is going to be a socket of type any or null like this, and is connected is going to be a boolean like that. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and write the actual socket context. So const socket context is equal to create context with the type of socket context type, which we just created above, and it's going to be an object with a default value of socket null and is connected of false like this. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's export a hook where we are going to use this context. So export const use socket is an arrow function which just returns use context and pass in the socket context like this. Great. And now let's actually write the socket provider. So go ahead and write export const socket provider. So just make sure you export this constant as well as this one. And let's go ahead and let's pass in the children. Sorry, let's extract the children like this. And let's go ahead and give them a type of children.react.react node like that. So we can actually collapse this like that, just so it's easier to look at. And go ahead and return this component where we're going to add a constant socket and set socket from use state, and default is going to be null. Const is connected and set is connected of use state false like this. And now let's write a use effect which we have imported. Don't forget the dependency array here. Whoops. And inside, let's go ahead and let's add const socket instance, the new client IO as any. So open it in brackets like this. Go ahead and open brackets again. Process.environment.next underscore public underscore site underscore URL with a question, with an exclamation point. So I just want to quickly explain that this next public site URL is localhost by default in development. So that's why we don't add anything inside of our environment file. But later, when we deploy, we are going to change this next public site URL to match our deployment URL at the end. So this is all supposed to be one line like that. And then go ahead and pass in the options like this. So I'm going to zoom in back. The path is going to be /API/socket/IO, and add trailing slash is going to be false like that. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's add the connect and disconnect events. So socket instance.on connect, pass in the arrow function, set is connected to true like this. And socket instance dot on disconnect, disconnect like this is going to be an arrow function which set is connected to false like this. Then at the bottom we're going to go ahead and write set socket instance like this, and return an arrow function socket instance dot disconnect, whoops, like this. Perfect. And let's just go ahead and return a socket context dot provider like that, and render the children inside, and go ahead and pass in the value of socket and is connected like this. Perfect. So now we have this provider. Now let's go ahead inside of our app folder, inside of our main layout right here, and let's go ahead and wrap everything inside of this theme provider in a socket provider. So socket provider from add/components/providers/socket-provider, and wrap in the model provider as well as the children like this. Perfect. And make sure you imported socket provider from add/components-provider socket provider. So now let's go ahead and let's create a socket indicator, which is going to be inside of this corner right here, which is either going to be green or orange, depending on if our connection was successful or not. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and open our terminal. And we have to add a new component from chatcn called badge. So let's go ahead and find the badge component right here, and let's go ahead and copy this for npm like that. I'm gonna paste that here. So npx chatcn UI at latest add badge. Great. So go ahead and press enter and just wait a couple of seconds and then confirm it, of course, and there we go. And now you can npm run dev your application. And let's go ahead now and let's create our socket indicator. So I'm going to close everything here. I'm going inside of my components, and inside I'm going to create a new file, socket-indicator.tsx, like this. Let's mark this as use client like that. And let's import use socket from /provider socket provider, but I'm just going to change it to /components like that. And let's import badge from add/components/UI/badge, which we just added. Perfect. Export const socket provider, whoops, socket indicator, my apologies, is going to use the is connected status from use socket, which we imported. If we are not connected, in that case, let's go ahead and return a badge like this with a fallback of polling every 1 second, and let's go ahead and give it a variant of outline and a class name, whoops, and a class name of bg-yellow-600 text-white and border-none, like this. Perfect. And you can go ahead and copy this return function and move it outside of this if clause. So this is going to be if we are connected, and instead of using bg yellow, we're going to use bg emerald like this. So let me just collapse this too, so you can see that better, like that. So all in one line. I'm going to do the same thing here like that. Okay, and let's just change the text inside of this one, which is going to be live real-time updates like this. Perfect. And now let's go inside of our components, chat header right here. And let's go ahead and find the end of this paragraph, add a new div with a class name of ml-auto flex and items-center, and inside render the socket indicator like this, which we just created. So socket indicator, and I'm going to change it to components like this. Perfect. So let's see what's going on here. Now I'm going to refresh. Make sure you do npm run dev to start your application. And let's see if we're going to have any errors. So right now it says fallback polling every second, and there we go. Mine has successfully connected. So it's normal that in the first few seconds it doesn't connect, and you can go ahead and check your network tab to confirm that you're not having any additional errors for your socket. So let me just find the socket or IO perhaps. Let me refresh and see if that's going to work. And there we go. You can see that my IO connections are not failing. And let me show you how it will look if something goes wrong. So if you have a mismatch between your API routes. So I'm gonna go inside of my components, providers, socket provider right here. So if I wrote an invalid URL here, let's add a typo here. And if I attempt to refresh, there we go. You can see that now it says fallback, and in my network tab, you can see that I'm having errors. So double check that your paths are correct. Double check that you have add trailing slash. So this path API socket IO needs to match the server one. This next public site URL doesn't matter now because locally that's default localhost, but later when we deploy, we're gonna have to change it. And also, let's go ahead and check the IO in our paths. So make sure that in your pages API, you also have a matching API route, and also add the add trailing slash right here. Perfect. Great job. So you successfully created the connection to socket IO, and now we can go ahead and start developing the chat component. Again, if you try your best, if you copy my code and it still doesn't work, it could be that it's just a specific issue with your firewall or something like that, but you don't have to worry because you can still continue the tutorial, because we are going to have live polling as well as a fallback. So let's go ahead and let's create our chat input, which is going to be right here at the bottom. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to do that first for the channels. So pick a channel like general or new text. Make sure you are inside of a channel, and let's close everything here. Let's go inside of the app folder, inside of main folder, routes, channels, channel ID, page.tsx like this. And below the chat header, add a div, which is going to say future messages. So we're not going to have them yet. And give this div a class name of flex-1 like this. So it takes up all the space. And at the bottom, go ahead and add a chat input component like this. And if you save, you're going to get an error because chat input does not exist yet. So let's go inside of our components folder, inside of the chat folder, and create a new file, chat-input.tsx like this. Let's go ahead and let's mark this as use client, and let's do a quick export const chat input like this, and return a div chat input just like that. Go back inside of the channel ID page and now import the chat input from add/component/chat/chat input, so you can keep this header and input together like this. Perfect. And now if you save, there we go. So I have a space taking up future messages, and at the bottom I have a chat input. Perfect. Let's go ahead now and let's add this chat input some props. So interface chat input props is going to have an API URL, which is a string. It's going to have a query, which is going to be a record of string and any. It's going to have a name, which is a string, and a type, which can be either a conversation, if it's a one-on-one, or a channel. So we're going to reuse this chat input for both one-on-one communication and on the channels communication. So that's why we are making this as modular as possible, making it able to pass different API URL and the relevant query so that we can reuse it in different places. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's import all as z from Zod like this. And let's go ahead and quickly write the form schema. So const form schema is going to be z.object like that, which takes in the content, which is z.string with a minimum value of 1. And no need to do any custom error messages because we're not going to display error messages in the chat input. So now let's go ahead and let's extract all of those props here. So we're going to have the API URL, the query, the name, and the type like this. And let's just assign the props. So chat input props like this. Perfect. Now let's go back inside of the page. So the channel page here where we render the chat input, and let's give it all of those props. So name is going to be channel.name like that. Type is going to be channel. API URL is going to be /API/socket/messages. So we are going to create that route later. Right now it doesn't exist yet, but we are just preparing it. And the query that this route is going to need is going to be an object which has the channel ID, which is channel.id, and a server ID, which is channel.server ID, like this. Perfect. So now we no longer have any type errors. And now let's go ahead and let's create our form hook here. So const form is equal to use form from react-hook-form. Make sure you import that. Okay. And inside, sorry, before you open it, go ahead and give it a type of z.infer, open pointy brackets again, type of form schema, like that. And inside, go ahead and add a default values of content to be an empty string. Perfect. Now let's add a resolver, which is going to match this form schema. So go ahead and then import Zod resolver from add hookform/resolvers/Zod, like that. Perfect. Let's go ahead and add a resolver here. So resolver single one is going to be Zod resolver. Actually, I'm typing this inside of default values. My apologies. So outside of default values, resolver is going to be Zod resolver form schema, like this, and add a comma. There we go. So our form hook is ready now. And let's go ahead and write const is loading to be form state is submitting, like that. And let's write const on submit to be an asynchronous function which has values which are a type of z.infer, type of form schema, like that, and just log the values for now. So lowercase v, like that. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's import everything we need for our form. So import form control, form field, and form item from add/components/UI/form, like this. And let's also go ahead and import input from add/components/UI/input, like this. Perfect. So let's go ahead and let's start styling our form now. So go all the way to the return function, return this div, remove this div, and write form. Go ahead and spread the form constant which we have from this hook right here. Inside, add a native HTML form element and write on submit to be form.handle_submit, and wrap our on submit inside so we have access to these values inside. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's write a single form field, which is a self-closing tag, like that. Go ahead and give it a control of form.control, like that. Go ahead and give it a name of content and give it a render. Go ahead and destructure the field, like that, and immediately return a form item, like this. Perfect. Inside of the form item, go ahead and return the form control, like this. And now let's add a div with a class name of relative p-4 and pb-6, like that. Perfect. Inside of here, let's go ahead and let's create a button element here, which is going to be a type of button. So, okay, let's do it like that. Give it a type of button. That's important, so it doesn't accidentally get triggered when we press enter. On click can for now just be an empty arrow function, and give this button a class name of the following. So let's go ahead and let's write absolute, like this, top-7, left-8, like that, height 24 pixels, width 24 pixels as well, bg-sync-500. On dark mode, it's gonna be bg-sync-400. On hover, we're gonna change it to bg-sync-600, like this. On dark hover, so dark hover, is gonna have a let's see, bg-sync-300. It's gonna have a transition class, rounded-full, p-1 flex, items dash center like this, and justify dash center like that. Perfect. And inside we are going to render the plus icon from Lucid React, which is gonna have a class name of text dash white. Dark is gonna be text dash and open a hex code 3133338 like this. So make sure you have plus imported from Lucid React, and I'm just gonna move it to the top right here. Okay, so right now the only thing you should have is this plus sign, but we're gonna change that a bit. Okay, let's scroll down right here. So outside of this button, go ahead and add our input component, which is a self-closing tag. It's going to be disabled on is loading, which we have as a constant. And now let's give this a class name of px-14, py-6 like this, bg-sync-200/90. On dark mode, it's going to be bg-sync/700/75, border-none, border-0, focus-visible, ring-0 like that. It's also going to be focus-visible, ring-offset-0 like that. Text-sync-600, and on dark mode, text-sync-200 like that. Perfect. So now if you take a look, we have a beautiful input form right here. Great. So this button is going to be used to open a model to upload a file message, so either an image or a PDF file, but we're going to do that later. What I want to do now is actually try this out. So one more thing I just want to do is after this input, I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a class name of absolute top-7 and right-8 like this. And what I'm going to do inside is I'm just going to add a smile icon from Lucid React like this. So make sure you imported this as well. Great. So this smile icon is going to be our trigger for an emoji model, but we don't have that yet. For now, what I want to do is actually test this out to see if there's if we are actually logging these values. So I'm going to go ahead and try. This is my message like that, and let's just press, and it seems to not be logging my values. So okay, let's take a look if we passed everything we need in this input. Perhaps we are missing, I think I know what I forgot to add. Yes, so I only added a class name to this input. After the class name, I also need to add the placeholder, which we forgot about. So the placeholder is going to be quite dynamic. I'm going to zoom out a bit just so you can see it in one line. So open pointy brackets like this, and go ahead and write message, and then open a special object. If type is equal to conversation, in that case, render the name of that user that we're texting. Otherwise, go ahead and render a hashtag plus the name of the channel that we are texting like that. So let's take a look at it now. I'm going to remove this message here, and there we go. Now it says message/general. If I go here, it says message new. If I go here, it says message edited audio. This, of course, is not going to exist for the audio. It's going to be in a different way. For members, it doesn't yet exist. We have to add it to in that page separately. So let's focus on the channels now. Perfect. And one more thing we have to add to the input is we have to spread the field like this. Perfect. So now it should be working in my inspect element right here. I'm going to try, this is my message like that. Let me just clear this and press enter. There we go. Content, this is my message. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's actually submit that message to an API request. So let's go ahead and let's import Axios from Axios, and let's import QS from query-string like this. Perfect. Let's go back inside of our onSubmit function here. Let's change this to be a try and catch block. Let's get the error and let's console log the error like that. And in the finally, actually no finally here, my apologies. So in the try block, now go ahead and write const URL is going to be qs.stringify URL. The URL base is going to be our prop API URL, which you can see in our page, is /API/socket/messages, like that. And in the query, we're just going to pass the query, which in our case is going to be this channel ID and server ID. Perfect. And now let's go ahead and await axios.post URL and values, like that. Perfect. And make sure you name the prop values like this so you don't get an error like I have. Perfect. And what I expect now in my inspect element is a 404 error. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press enter. And there we go. We have a 404 not find. So now let's go ahead and let's create that route so we can finally create our first message. So now let's go ahead and let's create our failing API route, which is currently returning a 404. So if you take a look at our channel page file, you're gonna know that it goes to /API/socket/messages. So maybe you already guessed that we're gonna do that inside, not inside of the app router, but inside of the pages folder. So let me just find the pages folder. There we go. So we're gonna do it inside of the pages folder, API socket, inside of here. So we have access to this response, which can accept sockets, so we can send it back to all connected users. So let's go inside of pages API socket.io, and inside create a new file, messages.ts, like this. Perfect. So let's go ahead and write that now. But before we continue, let's actually go ahead and create a new lib. So we have a lib called current profile, but this current profile, due to its nature, will not work inside of the pages folder. So what we have to do is we have to modify it to work for pages folder. So go ahead and copy that and paste it and rename it current-profile-pages. So we know it's only for the pages folder. And we can no longer use this out from clerk next.js. Instead, we have to use get out from /clerk next.js/server, like this. And then we can go ahead and use get out like this, but we have to pass in the request. So let's get the request from this param next API request from the next package, like this, and pass in the request inside. And everything else can stay the same. So we just replaced the auth and we have to pass in the request because that's the way the pages folder work. Perfect. So we have this new thing now, and now we can go back inside of pages API socket messages right here. So let's go ahead and let's write export default asynchronous function handler, like that. And this function is going to have the request of next API request from next and the response of next API response server IO from our custom types, like this. Perfect. Now inside, let's go ahead and write if. Let me just zoom in. So if request.method is not post, like this, in that case, return res.status 405.json, like this, error, method not allowed, like this, allowed. Okay. And now let's go ahead and open a try and catch block. So first let's resolve the catch. So catch error, like this. Let's console log messages underscore post. And let's just pass in the error like this, and let's return response.status 500.json with a message internal error, like this. Perfect. So now we can go back inside of our try block and let's write const profile is equal await current profile pages, like that. And yeah, let's also go back inside of our lib folder current profile pages, and let's just rename this to current profile pages as well, so we don't accidentally import it from this one, which is used for the app folder. So I'm just gonna close those, and let's go ahead and import the current profile pages from /lib current profile -pages, like that. And let's go ahead and pass in the request, like that. Perfect. And let's also immediately destructure the content and the potential file URL from request.body, like that. And let's also go ahead and get the server ID and channel ID from request.query like this. Perfect. Let's go ahead and let's check if we don't have a profile. So if there is no profile, in that case, you can go ahead and return rest.status 401.json with an error unauthorized like that. Perfect. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this. And let's check the same thing for server ID. So if there is no server ID, status is 400 and error is server ID missing like that. Let's copy and paste this. And let's do this one for channel ID. So the error is going to be channel ID missing. Let's copy it again. And this one is going to be for the missing content. So if there is no content, in that case, content missing like that. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's import our database util. So import db from @/libdb like that. Let's go below this check for content and let's go ahead and get our server. So const server is equal await db.server.find first like this, where ID is server ID as string, members is sum, profile ID is equal to profile.id. So we are just confirming that the user trying to send this message is actually a part of this server. And let's go ahead and let's include the members like that. Perfect. So if there is no server, in that case, return rest.status 404.json with a message of server not found. So message server not found like this. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's find the channel. So const channel is equal await db.channel.find first, where ID is channel ID as string like that, and server ID is server ID is server ID as string. And instead of semicolons, we are using commas like that. And let's just copy and paste this check for the server. So if there is no channel, it's a 404 message saying channel not found like this. And now let's go ahead and let's try to find the member. So const member is equal to server.members.find, get the individual member like that. If member.profile ID is matching the current profile.id like that. So we find one member. Perfect. And let's go ahead and copy this again. If there is no such member, so if in the entire member list of the server we could not find one that matches our profile ID, let's go ahead and return member not found, because that is not a part of our server. Perfect. And now let's go ahead and finally create the message. So const message is going to be equal to await db.message.create data is going to be content, file URL, channel ID, which is going to be channel ID as string like this, member ID, which is going to be this member which we found in this constant, so member.id like that. And let's go ahead and let's include member like that, and let's also include profile true like this. Perfect. And now we can already just do this, return response.status of 200.json message like that. But I also want to do something else. I want to immediately emit a socket IO to all the active connections. So the way I'm going to do that is by creating a unique channel key. So const channel key is going to be open backticks chat, open colons, open an object, channel ID, comma, colon messages like this. Perfect. So we are going to watch this channel key also when we create a hook for watching socket messages on the front end. So we're gonna get back to this constant later to confirm that you don't do any typos here. And let's just do response question mark socket question mark server question mark IO dot question mark dot emit. Let's pass in the channel key as the first argument and the new message as the second argument. There we go. And now let's go ahead and let's open our Prisma Studio so we can watch our newly created message, because currently there is no other way. So npx Prisma Studio like this. And I'm gonna go ahead and open my message table right here. As you can see, it's currently empty. So let's now try. I'm also gonna open inspect element here just to confirm there are no errors when I type. So hello there, let's send. It seems to be working because this was disabled. Okay. And let's go ahead and let's look at our Prisma Studio where I have the message. And let's see if a new one was there. And there we go. Content is hello there. We have the member ID. We have the connection to the member, channel ID. The deleted status is false. Everything seems to be working fine. Great. Now let's go ahead and create a model for uploading file messages. So let's go ahead and let's create this pop-up right here, which is going to enable us to send file messages. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside of hooks, use modal store right here. And inside of this use modal store, we're going to have to add a new model type, which is going to be message file like this. And we're also going to have to add an API URL, which is going to be an optional string, and a query, which is going to be an optional record of string and any inside of this model data right here. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and let's find the most appropriate model we can copy. So inside of models, the model I want to copy is the initial model because it already has the drop zone inside. So copy the initial model. And let's go ahead and let's rename this to message-file-model.tsx like this. So make sure you are inside of message file model here. Let's go ahead and let's rename it to message file model like that. And now what we have to do is change a little bit of how it works. So first things first, let's go ahead and remove this use effect for mounting. Let's go ahead and remove this state for is mounted, and let's remove this if clause for if it is mounted. Perfect. And now above this use router, let's go ahead and add const is open on close type and data from use model from /hooks use model store. So make sure you add this hooks use model store import here. Perfect. And now let's go ahead and let's create a constant is model open to be is open, and type needs to be message file like this. And then we're going to use this is model open to handle our open status. So let's change this dialog open to not be hard coded, but to use is model open. And now let's go ahead and let's create our const handle close function. So handle close like that, which is going to reset the form and call the on close, which we extracted from the use model here. And now let's go ahead and go to our dialog and add on open change to be handle close like this. Perfect. So of course we're gonna have to modify it even more, but for now, this is enough for us to go inside of the components providers, model provider right here, and add the message file model from /models message file model. And I'm just going to change it to /components like this. There we go. So add the message file model. And now we can go ahead inside of our chat input here. So components chat input, go ahead and the structure on open from use model. So we have to import that use model from /hooks use model store. So make sure you have this new import right here inside of the chat input. And then let's find the button, which we have an empty handler on, and let's replace this to call on open message file. And the data it needs is going to be the API URL and the query like this. So make sure you pass in both of those. Perfect. And now let's go ahead and let's already try this out. So if I click here, there we go. I have this initial model opening. Perfect. So now we'll keep it opened. Make sure you pass in both the API URL and the query, that it is the correct model. And I can close this and I can go inside of components, models, message file model right here. Perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the name from the form schema, so we're not going to need that. And I'm also gonna go ahead and change the title right here. So instead of customize your server, it's going to be add an attachment like this. And I'm going to change this description to be send a file as a message like this. I'm gonna go to this form right here, and I'm gonna find where is the form field that renders the input for the server name. And I'm going to delete that entire form field. So let me zoom out so you can see. So leave this form field with the file upload, but remove this form field with the form item, label, and an input like this. So remove that entire thing and just zoom in. There we go. Let's change the button from create to send like that. And now let's go ahead and let's change this file upload endpoint to use the message file. So if you remember, in the file upload, we are either allowing a message file or a server image. That is because inside of our core file UploadThing router, we allow server image, which only accepts an image, but for our message file, we accept both an image or a PDF. So you can see the text here change to images and PDFs. Perfect. So let's go back inside of our message file model here right now. And let's go ahead and let's change our onSubmit function here. So it's going to be a little bit different, and we have to go ahead and let's actually remove this use effect. We're not going to need it. Let's remove the form message and form label, and let's remove the input import. Perfect. And instead, let's go ahead and let's import QS from query-string like this. Perfect. Inside of the onSubmit function right now, we're gonna go ahead and generate our URL. So const URL is equal to qs.stringify URL like that. And let me just expand my screen a bit. Okay, so stringify URL. Inside, passing the URL to be API URL, but we don't have it yet because we have to destructure it from our data. So let's find our data right here. We have it from the use model, and let's go ahead and let's extract API URL and query from the data like this.